All right, and welcome to Hat Trick Sports Talk. I am joined as always by Brannan and Shane. Say hello, guys.
Hey, what's happening?
Hello.
We have a pretty short outline today, but we have some really interesting topics. I imagine this will be the rant pod, maybe.
Hmm.
I know for some things it will be, so this should be a fun one. Let's start, of course, with the NBA playoffs. We're going to start with the Lakers and Trailblazers. Interesting game last night, much different from game one. Brandon, I'll start with you. What was your reaction for game two last night? Excuse me.
Um, Game two. A lot of people have been talking about oh, the Lakers played so much better, yada yada yada. I disagree. I think it was a situation where the Blazers played worse, and I'll say this: the Blazers looked tired. They looked like a team that had been been playing 8 games of
They've been playing 10 games of basically
ten
playoff
game
games.
of 10 game of playoff basketball. Of course, they're gonna have one game where they are gonna not be dominant.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be interesting going forward, considering Damian Lillard um, dislocated hit. I think it was the middle finger on his
Yeah.
shooting hand. Um,
He said he's going to play game three. He said, I'm going to play. I'm pretty confident he'll play in game three, which would be tomorrow night. So yeah, I think he'll play. I
it,
think,
yeah, whether I mean, if he plays, it's still gonna be off-putting because for anybody who's ever played basketball, the middle finger of on your shooting hand is one of the most important
yeah,
for the flick. But we'll see.
it's definitely pretty uncomfortable. For me, it was pretty simple. For me, it was Anthony Davis finally being Anthony Davis. Um, he played incredibly well. 31 points, 11 rebounds. I really felt like AD finally kind of came into his own. And it was really funny looking at both of the 1 versus 8 seed games because it was kind of like a wake up call. Game one kind of felt like a wake up call, not only for the Lakers, but also for Milwaukee as well. Shane, what was your feeling on game two last night between the Lakers and the Blazers?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think you know Anthony Davis. He really he looked a lot more aggressive, just going for it, and making the shots when he could, and LeBron as well. I think kind of took advantage of the defense in some ways, and then that helped him obviously. But yeah, I mean, like Brennan said, it's the Blazers just they didn't look like themselves. You could definitely tell that um, that they didn't look into it, and that's understandable, especially later on. When you're getting when you're getting killed that badly in any sport in any game, I mean it's hard to keep your head up and to keep fighting. But um, I think I mean I don't imagine Portland is going to play that bad again in the series. Just because it's like, okay, we got that game behind us, and now they're kind of thinking, all right, let's get back to what we do. And so yeah, I mean, the rest of the series should be interesting. Um I still I still like LA because I think that they, you know throughout the bubble, they haven't been that great, and I think part of it is just because they haven't exactly been trying their hardest, because they're kind of like, oh, we're the 1 seed, whatever, we'll just get through these 8 games, and then, but meanwhile, like Brandon said, Portland, they've been fighting for their lives, so they're in this attack mode already, if you will, and so after game one, they're kind of like, okay, well, we need to respond to that, so, and I think that's what they did, and for LA. I think that's what they did. So, yeah, it should be an interesting series. I don't. I mean, I don't see it being like another slaughter like that. But yeah, just how the teams move forward after this. It's what I'm curious to see.
Looking at the Lakers as well, LeBron looked confident finally with this team. I mean, you saw the mic'd up. That was one of the best mic'd up segments I've ever seen LeBron have, where he's just like, oh, we're built different. He seems to have a confidence in his team. The team seems to have more confidence in themselves, which I don't think they really had throughout the seeding games or even that Denver game where they barely won. It seemed like LeBron especially just didn't have confidence in his actual team. And I think that game, he just kind of felt like, okay, we kind of got this now. Now, again, I'm trying not to overreact like I did that Denver game because clearly I overreacted that game. Clearly I did. I'm not ashamed to say that I clearly did, but
Yeah, it's all right.
I look at this game and I'm like, okay, are they going to be confident in Game 3? Game 3 is going to be massive because if Game 3 is close and if Portland finds a way to pull it out, like it could be tough sledding. Like I don't know if the Lakers are going to revert back to what they've always been here in the bubble, or are they going to finally build something? Like I want to see a stretch of this first now.
Look
I'm
like
tired of.
I'll just point this out. The Lakers cannot continue on this pace of point scoring.
No, yeah, that's for sure.
If the Trailblazers had been firing on all cylinders with C.J. McCollum, Damian Lillard, and Carmelo Anthony,
and Gary Trent too,
if all of those guys are firing on the same night, they will blow the Lakers out. Anthony Davis was the only player on the team with over 20 points. Only player.
LeBron didn't have a great night.
LeBron had 10. JaVale McGee had 10. Pope had 16. Danny Green had 3. J.R. Smith had 11. Kuzma had 7.
Can
Howard
Danny Green shoot
9.
some threes, bro? Can Danny Green shoot some threes?
Here's my point. Here's why I'm not buying the Lakers still, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I will not buy them even if they beat the Trailblazers. Because if they're not going to be putting up, if this supposedly all-star team or like amazing team is not having more than one player putting up more than 20 points a game, and they're losing just because the Trailblazers are not like firing as they should be because they had one poor night, I'm predicting tomorrow the Trailblazers are going to come out on that court, and the players that were shooting 20-plus points are going to go back to shooting 20-plus points, and you know what's going to happen? The Lakers are going to have a problem. Yep. It's just a fact. They're going to have a problem. If they can't get to shooting 20-plus points for multiple players, they're done.
It's not about the points necessarily. This is something that we talked about, Brannan and I, last night when we did the lottery show. This is something that we've continuously talked about with this series, even on this show. It's the 3 is bigger than 2 thing. The reality with Portland is that they actually have 3-point shooters. I said, like, why isn't Danny Green shooting as many threes? The guy was literally there to shoot spot-up threes. That's what he's there to do, and he's not doing it. And KCP definitely had a great shooting night. He won't do that consistently, let's be honest. I wonder if AD can offset some of that stuff, and I think he did last night, but even, again, Portland didn't really shoot the ball incredibly well. I look at AD's kind of the X factor for the Lakers in the playoffs. If they go far, AD has to have more games like that where he's actually really aggressive, and I think that can offset it a little bit. Shane, to finish off the Lakers, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think it all just depends on, how much offensive firepower Portland can really pull out, you know what I mean? Because if they get, I mean, like Brandon said, if they get these 4 guys who are all pretty good 3-point shooters, especially Damian Lillard, I mean, he's the best in the bubble, probably, 3-point shooter. And yeah, I mean, for a team like the Lakers that isn't great defensively, they're going to have a hard time. So, but yeah, I mean, I think if they do want to win, they got to get, AD has to continue playing like that, and LeBron has to step up, and you know what I mean. So he has to, do better than 10 points. But
I just like to remind us all that, sorry to interrupt you, Shane. I just
No,
like to point out that if the Lakers beat Portland, they will most likely have to face another hot shooting 3-point team in Houston.
yeah.
Right.
Like, they don't have a very likely path to the finals if they can't get their shooting together.
Mhm.
You know? Like, it's not
For
the
their
worst.
defense.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely going to be a tough road for them. Before we get to Houston, I want to get to the Clippers and more particularly Paul George. Now, again, as we keep time up, the Clippers are not fully healthy. Patrick Beverley didn't play or hasn't played so far, I don't believe, or hasn't played significant minutes so far. But I did want to talk about Paul George. He played okay last night, but again, as I always say every time Paul George shoots a shot, playoff P, right? Playoff P is kind of the theme now with the Clippers about Paul George just not really stepping up in these big playoff games. He wasn't great on Wednesday. Shane, are you concerned about Paul George? Do you feel like he needs to be an X factor for this team to have a big run over somebody like Kawhi?
Yeah, I mean I think it helps without a doubt. That's the one thing about the Clippers is they have such a deep roster that it's not it's not a huge concern for me if they aren't if they aren't totally healthy. But seeing the way that they struggled against, at least defensively, against a team like Dallas, who has, I mean, let's just be honest, they haven't been great in the bubble. That is a bit concerning for me because, I mean, yeah, Dallas has, good offensive players. Of course, Luka, Porzingis. But it's like, you need to be able to not only stop that as a defense, but respond to it and score a bunch on your own. Because Kawhi, I mean, as amazing as he is, especially as a defender, he can't do it all himself. You know what I mean? Especially, depending on what team you're going against. So, yeah, I mean, it is. I think it will be beneficial for sure if they have Paul George. He played most of the game, but he didn't have as many minutes as I probably would have liked him to. But it's just the way it works, I guess, when you are dealing with injuries, whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think that they will need him for sure in order to be successful. But it's you just kind of have to wait and see with his health.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Brandon, what are your thoughts on Paul George being an important factor for this Clippers team?
Well, he hasn't been an important factor so far.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. He just doesn't really show up when it's needed,
Mm-hmm. And that's been the case throughout his playoff career.
Yeah. He's not a very good not a very good
Pretty simple, just not very great in the playoffs. But
yeah.
does that worry you moving forward for the Clippers, not only in this series but moving along?
A little bit,
Yeah.
Because that's been what's like throughout the season. The Clippers always looked like that championship team when it was Kawhi, Paul George. When everybody.
But they only saw it for 2 weeks. That was part of the problem.
That's the thing. But also, you that's when we saw them like that. That's when we were like, oh yeah, this is a championship team. It's like, okay, well, if Paul George isn't going to play like that in the playoffs, then
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
it's a
There's
bit concerning, but
they're still such a difficult team for me to evaluate.
yeah,
We're 2 games into the playoffs, and I still can't really evaluate what they are, because from a chemistry standpoint, Paul George not being himself necessarily, Zubats is not going to get you 20 and 10 every night, right? So it's like I'm still having a very difficult time evaluating them, especially against this Dallas series.
this is my thing about the NBA playoffs this year that's really bizarre to me. Sorry, my home phone's ringing.
Yeah, no, it's
this
okay.
is the thing. No, this is the thing about the NBA playoffs this year that are really bizarre to me. Not only the fact that it's during a pandemic in this bubble in Orlando, but the thing that's even weirder to me is the fact that like this year there like to me there is not a single. Most years you can look at a few different teams and go, oh, this team is just great. They got all this stuff. They're gonna, they're gonna be great. They're make a deep run. To me, there isn't a team like that this year.
When we went back, let's go back to March, right? Before the hiatus. What did
Yeah.
we talk about? We said, okay, we kind of knew who the favorites were, right? We knew, okay, Milwaukee's going to be there. We knew the Lakers and the Clippers would be there. Maybe Houston, although I wasn't confident of Houston at that time. The bubble has changed this completely. We had 4 months off, and there's literally just nobody that's really clear cut. At least now, again, we've only seen 2 games of these teams play in the playoffs, so this might be a semi overreaction. As we go along, we might actually find a favorite or maybe an underdog. If there's any year for a team like the Miami Heat, for example, to find their way to the NBA Finals, it's this year, because there could be an underdog just kind of floating around. Brandon, what are your thoughts on that? Because it definitely does seem to be no true favorite at this point.
I don't know, man. I mean, basketball never really seems like a game for the underdog. It always seems to favor the team that's marked to win it all, unless they like fall off a cliff. I don't know. I'm like Miami will probably move on to the next round, but for the most part, I think it's going to be one of the usual suspects that win it this year again.
I still feel like that would be the case, but for some of these usual suspects, it feels like it's going to take a while for them to sort of figure out how to deal with it, because these first round series are normally not as, like, for example, the Magic and Bucks series, to me, like, it's somehow more compelling after 2 games. Even like, and, with that series in particular, Chris Middleton did not play well last night. And that's a massive concern to me, even though the rest of the supporting cast played ridiculously well. That's a massive concern, because for me, Chris Middleton, just like people talk about Paul George, it's the same thing with Chris Middleton. Like, where's that playoff performance? And when you're playing somebody like Orlando, it can actually be a bit more competitive of a series than even what we saw last night, because of what we saw in Game 1 as well. But it's kind of that series kind of taken care of. In talking about the Nuggets and the Jazz, Brandon, I'll start with you. What has impressed you about Donovan Mitchell so far in this series? Because he seems to be just absolutely balling out there.
I think it's the fact that he's been able to keep his mind. The fact that he was able to like come back into basketball after his whole situation and just kind of, be able to ball out. It like so much of basketball is a mind game sometimes. Yeah, I'd say that's probably the most impressive.
Shane, what about you with Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he, and I didn't know this until yesterday. I was looking at the stat line. He had the least amount of time on the floor between the 5 starters for Utah. But that just goes to show you, his presence that he has, right? And I mean, he was, I think, like 6 for 7 with 3-point shots, which is ridiculous. And he, I mean, he's just been very, very effective without a doubt. which is good because I was kind of concerned about him coming into the bubble because, beforehand his, during the break, his head kind of seemed to be not in the right place just because of, kind of the drama that was surrounding this team.
And Rudy Gobert, him and Rudy as well, trying to iron that out.
Right. But it doesn't really seem to be much of an issue because, I mean, hey, he's doing all right. So, yeah. I mean, I think if he can continue like him and Rudy Gobert, of course, if they can continue at this kind of a level, I think I think they would have a decent chance winning this series, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So,
Yeah, it's definitely a close series. I feel like this is going to go 7 games at this point because game 1 and game 2 were polar opposites of each other. And this entire series feels like each game is going to be polar opposite. Each game is going to feel a lot different. And that's when you have series where you're kind of confidently feeling that way, it mostly goes 7. And with this series, I don't really know about Denver's rotation yet. Utah, obviously, Donovan Mitchell seems to be the main guy. And obviously he deserves more credit. Like we're talking about guys like Lillard and Anthony Davis and all that. We need to start talking about Donovan Mitchell more because he's just been ridiculous, right? And so for me, at least, I think that he deserves a lot more credit for what he's doing. But this series is definitely gonna be really tight.
Yeah. Well, and it's tough for Denver because, I mean, the only guy that's really impressing me over there is Porter.
Jokic is still playing. Jokic is still doing Jokic things, but it's not necessarily special all the time.
He's still playing good defense. But yeah, I mean, the rest of the team, they don't really look like themselves. I don't know. But yeah,
it's definitely weird game to game.
Yeah.
And then let's go to Houston. Shane, Houston, they're shooting. I mean, they were kind of up and down yesterday, but they seem to really have control of this OKC series when a lot of people thought it could be a really tight one with OKC, but the shooting of Houston seems to really completely edge that out. This series could be over much quicker than I think we all thought. But what are your thoughts on Houston?
Yeah, I was worried about Houston going into this series because of injury concerns and whatnot, and OKC, they were looking pretty solid, but man, I mean, they have not only showed up offensively, but they've played pretty good defense as well. In all honesty, there's something that I've noticed with Houston is that they, because throughout the year it's kind of been like a James Harden, Russell Westbrook show, But something I've noticed is that, like in this series, they've really been spreading the ball around, spreading the love around. Tucker's made some noise. What's his name? Covington. They've all been, they've all been showing up and making some noise. So.
Daniel House as well has been an interesting X factor for them as well.
Without a doubt. And one of our biggest concerns with them before, or at least one of mine, is that they don't play that well at defense. Yet, they've actually been doing pretty well, really. They only held Thunder to 98 points? Yeah,
something around there.
Yeah, which is pretty impressive. So,
considering the uniqueness of their lineup as well, right? With having Tucker play center.
Yeah.
Brannan, to finish off Houston, what are your thoughts on them, especially defensively? But what has impressed you about Houston so far in this series?
I would say Houston is just shooting well. They're kind of dominating this series. Like, there's nothing about OKC that I'm impressed with at all. So,
Mhm.
if
I feel like the game was closer this time because Dort was in there. Dort's a guy who is really just a primary defender type, right? Kind of like a Matisse Thybulle type, and for him, he's definitely helped them, like coming back, being in the starting lineup. He helped make that game close. I just haven't really seen enough from the three guards, SJ, Chris Paul, and Truder together, especially shooting the ball. And I think that's made the series what it is at this point, where Houston's dominating because the guard play's been okay, but it's not necessarily like all three of those guys are shooting the ball incredibly well, at least to keep pace with what Houston is doing. Because even in the first half, they struggled. They had a pretty terrible shooting performance, Houston did in the first half of that game. And yet that was your opportunity. That was OKC's opportunity to kind of put a run on. And by the halftime, it was still very, very close, which helped Houston kind of coast there in the second half, or at least in the fourth quarter. But yeah, even when Houston is struggling to shoot the ball, OKC just doesn't seem to have too much of an answer for it at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, and OKC was, they're kind of a strange team for me because they were the one, I guess, like underdog team that I thought would be the most challenging for the higher seed. But clearly that hasn't been the case. They just can't really seem to get it together. So
Yeah.
In my bracket, I almost had Houston winning the West, and now I'm starting to feel like I should have.
I'm not there yet, but I'm definitely more confident about Houston than I was before
I know
the
that's
hiatus.
it's still early to say stuff like that, but
Yeah. And then, Brandon, your Raptors are killing it right now. We're about, I don't know, midway through the second quarter, or actually pretty much at halftime of that game. We're recording this at, it's now 11:37 in the morning. Your Raptors are killing it. Talk about what has impressed you in this series for the Raptors. I know it's the Nets, but I'm sure you're still pretty excited about how they've been playing.
I think, yeah, for me, it's just like they continue to they continue to play Raptor basketball. Like they don't ever really go away from that like pretty solid defense. The way I put it is they bend but they don't break.
Yeah, that was game 2 for
They'll
sure.
Yeah, they'll absorb the buckets, but then they're like, all right, well, we have the offense as well as the defense to stay one step ahead to get the win. Because like game 2 was a little bit of that, like 3 is better than 2 at times.
Mm-hmm.
But then down the stretch, they were able. That's what they do well. Down the stretch, they pull away, and they are able to take it away from the other team. So I'm pretty excited. I mean, it's the Nets. We'll see what happens if we have to play the Celtics. I'm sure that'll be a harder matchup, but so far, I mean, it's a good warm up and it's a solid start to the season. I mean, honestly, I'd rather play the Nets than have to play the 76ers.
Right.
Or
And then talk about Van Vliet's impact, especially offensively. Because in game 1 and game 2, he played tremendous.
He's been all season. He's played really well. He's just a good shooter, and he's like overall he contributes to the defense. And we have a really solid lineup of players. We've got Siakam, Van Vliet. It's a team that I'm excited about, not just now but for the future.
Mm-hmm. Are you worried about Van Vliet and those contract negotiations? Because I know it's something that's been talked about throughout the week.
I'm not that worried about Van Vliet. I mean, I feel like he has a good thing going here, and I'm sure there's a possibility that he might go to another team. But like, the Raptors are in a good situation to give him a good contract again after extending Siakam's contract last year.
Mm-hmm.
So
I look at Van Vliet and I'm a little concerned because I look at some of those lottery teams and I wonder if they're gonna put a max contract on the table, even though I don't think he deserves a max contract. But you never know with some of those teams. But Shane, moving back to this series in particular, what has impressed you about the Raptors? I know it's the Nets, obviously, but what has impressed you about them so far?
Yeah, I mean, to me, more than anything, it's just their ability to be clutch, and because you look at game two, it got a little close for comfort for me, but I mean, you saw the way that they just locked down in the fourth quarter and really dominated. I mean, they only allowed, what was it, 18 points or something, and which is crazy, and they found a way to win. Like Brandon said, they did their thing, and this is an interesting team because I was worried about them losing Kawhi. Not that the whole team is just one guy, but I mean Kawhi is amazing, obviously, and so I just was worried that there was going to be kind of this hole, but it really doesn't feel like there has been. I mean, they've been just as good as they were last year. They aren't great at shooting threes. That's like my one gripe with them.
Van Vliet has been better at it for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, they only hit like 25% of their threes in game two, which is not great. But defensively, they are. I mean, they're killer. And they don't. I mean, yeah, the 3-point thing is. I mean, it's a concern, but like at the end of the day, I mean, I think they have enough scorers who are. I mean, Siakam, Lowry, Van Vliet. They have enough guys where they can consistently put up 15, 20 points. That it isn't as big of a deal, in my opinion, because they are able to back it up with good defense. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's, for them, it's just a matter of finishing and pulling through where it counts.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll move on to the Boston series, and I'll start with you again, Brandon, talking about that potential Toronto Celtics matchup with Gordon Hayward out for a good portion of time. Do you think that potentially helps the Raptors in some way if we get to that series, which seems pretty likely at this point?
Yeah, I'd say it helps them. It's one less threat that they have to deal with, one less shooter that they have to deal with. It'll be an interesting series, though, because I could make the argument that one of those two teams could be the representatives for the East
Mm-hmm.
in the finals.
Mm-hmm. Shane, what excites you about the potential for that series, as it seems pretty likely at this point?
Yeah, I think that would be a great series. We had our friendly debate about that Raptors Celtics game.
Yeah.
Which Boston obviously destroyed the competition there. But I think after this series, I mean, that was just one game. I think things will be a little different because they have both, definitely improved in their own ways. I think more than anything, this series is just showing that, other than Embiid, I mean, Philly really doesn't have much. I mean,
Yeah.
Harris has been okay, but other than that, I mean, they really don't have any 3-point shooters. They don't have any really great defensive players. I mean, he's just kind of doing everything himself and fighting for his life, it seems like. So, I mean, yeah. Whereas Boston, they have. I think they have guys spread out. You got Tatum, obviously, Browns, Marcus Smart, Walker, who are all. It's kind of like the Toronto thing where, they're all just really solid players all together who, have a wide variety of skills. So.
And not only that, let's look at the coaching as well.
Yeah.
With Nick Nurse and Brad Stevens, two of the best coaches in the league, so that match as well. There's just so many interesting pieces. Like, it's going to be a very long and tough series for both of those teams, winning if we get there. And in talking about Philly, a couple things stand out to me. One, clearly Embiid's energy, and this has been the case throughout his time in Philly. Sometimes the energy's there, sometimes it's not there. And I thought they would be better. I really did. Like, I sat there and thought, like, okay, they're usually better when one of them is out. They're usually better when Ben Simmons is out, or they're usually better when Embiid's out. To me, at this point, clearly they're better when Simmons is in there. But the bigger problem is the culture is just terrible. Like, I really feel like the only guy who's truly impressed me on that team so far is Thibault. But at the end of the day, I think the simplest thing is they need to get rid of Brett Brown. That seems to be the consensus. Brandon, do you feel the same way?
Yeah. He isn't good.
Do you think it's mostly a culture thing? Do you think it's how they're getting the ball to Embiid, or what is it for you with Brett Brown?
Well, for one, I feel like Brett Brown just doesn't have the mindset to figure out to shift things up. You know, he goes with the same lineup all the time. And I mean, if something's not working, you know what the definition of insanity is? Doing the same thing over and over again.
And they've been doing that for the last basically 2 years.
Yeah, like they've been going with the same lineup over and over again, and assuming it's going to keep working.
And then bringing in Horford too.
Right, they're only just putting in their young guys now, like as we talked about last night. And like, as you said, Horford has a max contract. What are they doing giving Horford a max contract?
And he's coming off the bench.
That's insanity.
And I look at Tobias Harris too, and I just feel like Harris, to me, when I watch the Sixers, I forget that Harris is on the team.
Yeah.
Because I feel like he needs to be making more of an impact. Like, the team just feels, in some ways, too big to me. Shane, what are your thoughts on the Sixers and Brett Brown right now?
I mean, yeah, I think, I think he needs to go for sure. I don't like the culture, but also just like Brandon said, how he seems to be doing the same thing that isn't working, expecting it to work somehow. But I mean, I think, Embiid and Simmons are great, obviously, but for some reason they don't work well together. And you need more, and you need a supporting cast around them, because basketball, it's team sport. You can't just do it with one guy, so, or even two. Lakers. But anyway, so yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. Who knows if and when that'll happen? I mean, I was expecting them to get rid of Brett Brown long ago, yet here we are. So,
Is there so if you're Philly and you're the management staff, right, and you're looking at this team and you're looking at bringing in a new coach, whoever that is, do you figure out Embiid and Simmons with the new coach, or do you say, no, let's trade one of them, try to get something back? We don't even know what they would get back in return. And that's kind of the bigger question. Yeah. But Shane, do you feel like a new coach would be the main thing first before they start thinking about splitting them up, or do you think they do both of those things this offseason?
I think a new coach is the most important thing. They need a guy like Greg Popovich. You know what I mean? Like someone who can come in and, just establish a better culture that's more, more about building the team and just their relationships. You know what I mean? So, whereas, not on the field, on the court with the players. I mean, yeah, I do think, I do think you bring in a new coach, and I would try and see if you can kind of work it out between them because they are both really good. So, if you had them both, I mean, that would work out well or better, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't, I would. Who would I get rid of? Probably Embiid.
That's kind of where I've always been.
Yeah, but then I mean, it's who do you get in return? I mean, I imagine teams would give up pretty good players for him. So, I don't know. I'm not expecting them to win this series at all. So now I'm just kind of looking forward to the offseason to see what they do or where they go, if they do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Brandon, I'll finish off the Sixers discussion by asking you the same thing. Like, who would you move if you're the staff for the Sixers? Do you move Embiid? Do you move Simmons? Or do you just not move them and get a new coach? What are you kind of thinking if you were in the management office for the Sixers at this moment?
I don't know if anybody would like Embiid's good, but like I keep hearing, and maybe I'm being advised too much by watching inside the NBA, but I keep hearing Shaquille O'Neal saying if you're gonna be an all-star big man, you got to be scoring more than 20 points a game. And so I don't know if like I don't know if they have anyone to move who would be movable.
You're not even sure they can move Embiid for value at this moment.
I don't think so. Like as a big man, he's not like that all-star level, really. I mean, currently.
Mm-hmm. I think it really depends on the game for me with Embiid, and at times I feel the same way with Simmons as well. It's just like, what's the game going to look like today versus the next day or whatever, and it's just that's why it's so tough. And maybe it's a culture issue. I don't even know.
Yeah. Now
It's just really difficult.
I will give him credit because he's in a very tough situation right now because he's basically the only
Offense
they have, and just looking in his eyes whenever he's playing, you can tell he is ticked off and he's unhappy and just not having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Which I feel like is kind of the theme for most people who have played in Philadelphia the last 5 or 6 years.
Right. And you saw on JJ Redick's podcast, I keep going back to this because I think this was where it really hit for me. JJ Redick had Jimmy Butler on during the offseason. And, of course, they both played last year in Philly. And they were like, this culture is terrible. And there's a reason why JJ, who grew up in Philly, decided to leave. There's a reason why Jimmy decided to leave and obviously go on to much better pastures in Miami. And then moving on to Miami as well, I have been unbelievably impressed with Miami so far. As we talked about on the lottery show, I just love what Duncan Robinson's doing. I love what Jimmy Butler's doing. Bam didn't even have a great game, and they still were shooting threes amazingly. As we talk about threes greater than 2, Miami's kind of that one team where it's really like that in the Eastern Conference, and I'm really enjoying how they're playing right now. Now, obviously, the Pacers, no Sabonis, Victor Oladipo still coming off injury. They're not necessarily the perfect parameter, but it's been really impressive nonetheless. Shane, what are your thoughts on Miami?
Yeah, I mean, they it's interesting because this is a team, before the season where I looked at them and I thought, well, they'll probably be all right, and maybe they'll get like a 7 or 8 seed, but then you see the way that not only Jimmy Butler is playing, but also, of course, Bam, Duncan Robinson.
Jay Crowder's not been terrible.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's kind of stepped up, especially defensively. This is a team that has impressed me quite a bit defensively. Not to mention that, they are obviously a great offensive team, and they're probably the best three-point shooting team. If I'm correct, they're the only team with a three-point percentage that's over 50%.
I think so. Yeah.
Which is crazy. So that's a big bonus for them. And then, obviously, like I said, they've been impressive defensively as well. So, and even their bench is really pretty good. So
Their whole roster is really nice.
Yeah. My one concern is that yes, they're great at the three, but overall, I don't know if they have enough overall firepower just throughout to be able to take on a team with a really good defense.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that they won't be competitive, but it would just be harder for them, I think. But I could be wrong. Have been before, so we'll see. They've impressed me without a doubt. I wasn't expecting this series to be as lopsided as it is so far. So
yeah. Brandon, for Miami in particular, moving forward, right? Let's say they play Milwaukee or Toronto or Boston. As Shane said, like these teams with definitely better defenses. How do you think that would be a challenge for Miami?
Miami, if I'm not wrong, is a fairly youngish team.
Fair. Right? They have a good mix of. They're pretty middle of the road average in terms of age. They have a good mix of guys like Iggy and of course Robinson.
I just think one thing that Toronto brings to the table whenever they play a team that a lot of teams don't have is they focus on defense as a team, which I've talked about a lot.
Right, team defense is something we've continuously talked about with the Raptors.
NBA is not something that is focused on a lot by teams. It's very individualistic defense. Whereas with the Raptors, they have much more of an NFL type defense where it's like a team effort, like a lockdown effort. They pride themselves on being no. If you're going to score on us, you're going to score on us from the three. And let's be honest, how many players in this league are very, very good at shooting threes? Only a handful. So I think it'll be very important to shut down to be able to I think it'll be the opposite deal with the Raptors if they play Miami, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be the opposite. They'll have to take away the three and force them to go down low, because Miami is not very big, and Toronto has a dearth of big men. Who you keep talking about Gasol. Yes, he can't shoot to save his life this year, but
he's definitely still good defensively.
He's still big. He's still a big, tall dude on defense who can get up there and block a ball or. So I don't know. I think, and when I keep saying oh, Toronto's amazing. Don't get me wrong. I very much recognize that Toronto easily could slip up and lose a series like that.
I would say Boston would be that one series. Boston would be that one series.
Boston to me is the only team that I'm afraid of, right?
And Milwaukee, but we'll get to Milwaukee later.
Yeah. We're assuming that Milwaukee even makes it to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Milwaukee would be much later down the road. I think the immediate thing for the Raptors would be looking at the Celtics. And then Shane, I'll continue with you here for our last couple of NBA topics. Adam Silver stated in an interview on Thursday that the new season starting on December 1st doesn't look very likely. There's also reports that free agency will be pushed back to a few weeks. The NBA Players Association very concerned about free agency because they don't know about the finances and all these things. The main reason they want to start on December 1st is that if we get the Olympics in July, think about this now, the playoffs would be happening technically, I would imagine, sometime in July or I guess pretty much June or July, maybe August. So they don't want to have the season and then have to stop and do the Olympics and then come back, saying that that's the potential case. But what are your thoughts on potentially an NBA season starting January, February, even as late as March next year?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that they want fans. And, the thing is, though, I mean, it's, we're in a we're in a time where you have to just work with what you got. You know what I mean? And yeah, it would be great if the season could just resume as normal. But it probably can't until, I mean, realistically, like next summer, probably, because, there's, I mean, if you think, we'll have a vaccine by the end of the year, but then, you got to have time for people to get it and then start integrating people into these big crowds. So, until we can have, full stadiums and arenas of people, it's probably going to be like June of next year. At least that's what the experts are saying.
I would make the argument, why not just run another bubble season,
And do regional bubbles, which they've talked about.
This has worked so well. Just do regional bubbles for each different sector of the country. And then when you get into the playoffs, move it back to Orlando, as you did this time.
Mm-hmm.
Bada bang, bada boom, you have another season. It worked perfectly, honestly. I don't see what would be the problem.
The major issue here with the bubble is they're trying to speed up the playoffs, apparently, in some fashion. Players are, going to get a bit restless. I don't know if you want to do that, even if, let's say, it's a 60-game season or a 52, whatever it would look like. Also, from a logistical perspective, if free agency gets pushed back, let's say 3 weeks, and the draft is still going to take place on October 12th. That's not changing. Yeah. The draft is going to be virtual. We'll be fine with the draft. But it's like, I just don't even know from a logistical perspective of how long is the offseason going to look. Is the offseason going to be 1 month? Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be the normal, 3 or 4? Like, the players are going to need some rest time before we start. And then let's say we start late January, February. How does that look with the Olympics? There's a lot more complications than it meets the eye in some way than just, we're going to do regional bubbles on all these things.
You could also make the argument that, and here's another interesting conversation to be had that we can talk about a little bit more down the line. You could argue that the Olympics is an important thing to happen, right? As a world unification, like good spirit thing to in this time of crisis and time of darkness, really. I would make the argument that that once the vaccines are there, once we've vaccinated the frontline workers, do we include Olympic athletes in that group of first wave people who get vaccinated?
Maybe
to allow for the Olympics.
Maybe.
And I would argue I argue you still do the Olympics next year, even if people can't be there, just do it, just bubble it up and because they're already in the Olympic Village. And
make the Olympic Village an Olympic bubble, basically.
They need because Japan needs the money, which they get from it on TV.
Well,
I want to watch the Olympics.
No, here's the thing, though, and yeah, well, you could make Japan makes the money thing. The reality is the IOC takes most of the money, which is again part of the problem.
Money off of it.
Yeah. But partially, there's a lot of different things going on with the IOC that we can't really dive into. But yeah, I mean, who knows? At this point, this is definitely a conversation for down the line. But it's going to be interesting to see how the NBA logistics work alongside the Olympics. And not only that, what about the NHL as well? That's some interesting pieces there. And then, Brandon, I'll start with you to finish off. Of course, we did the lottery show yesterday. I didn't ask this on the lottery show because I thought this would be a more apt conversation for the main show. And I heard Ryan Russillo talk about this as well, and the Ringer talk about this. So I thought it was an interesting topic to bring up. With no March Madness, right? How does it affect these prospects? How does it affect scouting as we're getting closer to the draft? Because we're a couple months away. How does no March Madness affect these different pieces to you?
I don't think it really affects it all that much because you have a long NBA season. I'm not NBA season. You have a long college basketball season as it is, right?
We had a full season anyway, other
Right.
than March
There was a
Madness.
full season. Um. So there's plenty of tape. All these players.
Mhm.
Yeah, because March Madness is only
And-
like 2-3 games for most people.
Right. I would say the players that will be affected are the players that would have been noticed in March Madness from smaller schools.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually you have one or two players that pop out in the March Madness that teams are like, oh, him. We'll take him in like the third or fourth round or whatever, you know?
Well, no, it would be 2 rounds, but you probably take him maybe
Whatever.
15 or 16, around the
Yeah.
lottery, end of the lottery, basically.
Right. So I don't think it'll be a huge difference. And like as we were talking about in the lottery yesterday, Robert, like it's a 4-player draft this year.
Yeah,
basically.
pretty much 4 or 5. Yeah, pretty much.
So I don't think it'll be that big of an impact.
Mm-hmm. Shane, what's your feeling on no March Madness affecting the NBA draft?
Yeah, I'm with Brannan on that. I mean, it's only a couple of games. It's for most players, and for even, I mean, if you're even looking at like, schools like Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, Michigan State, these schools that go far, whatever, they don't really need March Madness because they're already on the pros' radars. They're already being washed, whatever. Because
Or even the guys that we've talked about before already, even small guys like Obi Toppin, Anthony Edwards, we've talked about these guys all year anyway, right?
Right. But like Brandon said, every year there's that one team like like Loyola Chicago a few years back. They were like the 11 seed in one of the brackets, and then all of a sudden they're in the
Final Four.
Yeah, so you know what I mean. It's like those guys that you wouldn't really pay attention to, and then all of a sudden, let's take a look at these guys, and then you know what I mean. So, and there's like the one or two, maybe even 3 players from those kinds of schools who really get noticed in March Madness that are probably affected. But other than that, I mean, I don't think it's that big a deal. It's still sad we didn't get it because March Madness is my favorite tournament of any in the entire planet.
Yeah.
But oh well.
And I think this is something not only for the NBA, but also the NFL. This is going to be one of those years where you're going to have guys, especially let's talk about the NBA in specific. You're going to have guys late in the first round, in the second round, that maybe would have been in the lottery potentially or a bit outside it because of March Madness. They're going to come into the NBA and be productive. You're going to have guys like the draft board is basically set in stone at this point, but it's set in stone only based on what we had in February. The draft board for the NFL, I mean, obviously the ACC is playing, and the ACC and the SEC is playing, but I don't know how much teams are going to look at that because of the competition and all these other things. You're going to have guys in these later rounds that should have been first-round picks or early first-round picks, potentially, if I'm at the NBA, that are going to be productive. So you're going to find gems more often than not, I think.
Yeah. I'd say it's about right.
And then let's talk about some college football. Interesting news before we recorded, about a half an hour before we recorded. Outside the Big Ten headquarters this morning, they had the parents protest outside the headquarters saying, let us play and all those things. And the parents, especially on the Big Ten side, not as much the Pac-12, but certainly on the Big Ten side, have been very focused on getting their kids to play some football here in the fall. Shane, what were your thoughts on the protest this morning?
Well, I'll be honest, since it was, right before we recorded. I don't know much about it yet, but it's kind of ridiculous in my opinion because I mean, are you going to prioritize your kids' fun over their safety? I mean, it's if they don't have the proper safety protocols in place, which it doesn't sound like they do, kids are going to get the virus and they could die. I'll say that again. Kids could die.
They're already kids, I believe, in the Big Ten from the practices that they've already had, where there's kids with heart conditions on those teams from COVID. Like, it's not every kid our age or around 1920 where Shane and I are at, right? Like where they're like we're fully healthy or whatever. There are kids with some adverse health conditions. I imagine some of those parents in the Big Ten thing this morning have kids with those kind of conditions, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, even for people our age that are considered healthy, I mean, you're still not, I mean, there is still
a risk either way.
Chance of death. Yeah. It's low, very low, but it's it's greater than zero still. So, I don't know. This is just, I just thought it was kind of strange, especially since other conferences are still playing, which we've already talked about that, but that just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like either all of them do or none of them do.
And let's be honest, we saw the SEC schedule for week 1. All those games I'm not interested in. Alabama, Missouri. Do I really care about Alabama, Missouri? Do I really? I honestly don't.
No.
But let's get back to the topic at hand. Brandon, what are your thoughts on the parents' protest this morning?
I agree with Shane. I think it's ridiculous. It's dumb. It's selfish. It's pretty asinine. I mean, I could keep. How many more words could I come up? Do I need to get a thesaurus? Because I can keep coming up with different synonyms for stupid or dumb. Like, look, you guys know me, and everybody who listens to the show knows me. I'm a huge football fan, right? I also love college football. I eat college football for breakfast, lunch, and dinner during the season.
On Saturdays.
On Saturdays and Sundays, all I do with my weekend is watch like football. But
that's American right there.
Yeah, I know, right? And also, like, as a show, like, we want more stuff to talk about. But as a show, we also have talked a lot about how it's important for us to be safe and do our part to not get COVID out there. And like, I'm sorry, if I'm a parent, if I personally knew some of these families that had kids who had heart conditions and were still saying play the game, I have thoughts in my head that I'm not going to say because this is a PG programming show, but I'll just say this. I think they're terrible people if they're putting a sport in which the reality of which is maybe 2 players from each team on average will have a chance of making it to the NFL. Maybe higher for Ohio State, but I mean, no, it's honest. If you look at the stats, Ohio State has had the most players.
Really? Oh, geez.
Out of that division.
Yeah. Conference,
it's not worth it, right? It's a sport. I get it. It's big money. But when the conference is the one, when the ADs from the conference are the ones saying shut it down, you don't have any argument there.
What are you going to do? Change their mind?
Right, exactly. Because here's the thing. The ADs are the ones whose job it is to make money for the conference off of football. And if they're the ones saying we're willing to bypass making money off of the sport for the safety of the athletes, as I said to you, Robert, at the very beginning, like a couple weeks ago when we had our conversation about this whole thing, the schools would not be pulling the plug on the season if they didn't believe there was a way for them to safely have a season.
Right.
Hands down.
And see, here's my thing. Now, again, we're just thinking about, let's say if one of those parents have kids with heart conditions, we're not exactly sure at this time. But the reality of the matter is, if I'm a parent, you know what I'm thinking about, and you know what the NCAA is thinking about right now, and what they're hard at work on at this moment, trying to maybe get these players, these sons or daughters of these parents, for example, right? Because we're not only talking about football, we're talking about all these other sports as well. They're trying to get an extra year of eligibility for everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone should be focused on that.
Well, and aren't they planning on playing in the spring anyways?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Right, but even with that, they're literally working on it this time.
See, and then you have the ridiculousness of people saying we shouldn't play in the spring because it would just be unsafe. And I'm like, are you
why are we playing in the fall?
You're saying it's unsafe to play in the fall, but yet you want to play during a pandemic
in the spring
when you refuse to create a bubble. If you created a bubble, that'd be one thing.
But this is college kids.
But this is college. That ain't gonna happen. Also, they talk about how they'll be safer on campus. I call bullshit. Obviously anybody saying that has not been a college student in a long time, because we all know what college students do. College students, the moment they're on campus,
they party.
They go to frat houses, go to sororities, they party, they get drunk, they do stupid things.
Yeah.
Starting to sound like Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp over here. It's like, I don't know, it's just dumb. I'm so over it. People are so stupid in this country. Hands down.
Well, I would say for this particular issue.
I'm losing my mind.
Look, for this particular issue, more specifically for these parents and everything, I think we've made our point clear on this. But also, I keep going back to, why don't these parents just focus on the eligibility thing? Why not? Why not get your kid an extra year? Yeah. That's an extra year of school. That's an extra year of education. That's an extra year of playing football.
See, Robert, but what you don't get is they don't care about the school part.
But that's an extra year of your kid playing football.
Robert, do you know how many kids who play football end up going on and end up leaving without a degree?
Yeah.
So many. Which is one of the problems with the NFL. So many people, I believe honestly, the NFL should be starting an initiative to be like, hey, y'all should get your degree.
And you know what? I credit some of these guys like Cam Newton who've done that. They have the option to go back if they wish. Yeah. And for some of these guys in the NFL actually do that. It's actually amazing. And I know there's a guy on the Steelers who used to play for Tennessee. I'm blanking on the name right now. He's doing aerospace and all this stuff. So pretty impressive stuff there.
There's the guy who's the first black president of a football team in the NFL. He played for Arizona and for Washington, and then he went back to school. He didn't go back to school. He got his law degree, and then he went to to school to finish his law degree, and now he's the president of the Washington football team.
Yeah. But again, I think our point is clear with this. It's a ridiculous protest, and we need to focus on other things.
Can I do my rant about baseball now?
Yes, you may do your rant about baseball now. So let's talk about a couple of things. We'll mix these two together. First,
let me just get my voice ready.
This is going to be the rant of the week. So Fernando Tatis.
Do you have your popcorn ready, Shane?
Yeah.
So let's talk about a couple of these things first. We're going to mix this together. You want to focus in particular about MLB pitchers, but as well we're going to mix this and Tatis. So Fernando Tatis broke one of baseball's unwritten rules, as we like to call it. Fernando Tatis swung at a 3-0 count when they were up by 7, and he hit a grand slam. By the way, the Padres hit a bunch of grand slams this weekend, and then the both of the managers were pissed off, and most of the players, including Trevor Bauer and many others on many teams that have supported him about this situation. Brannan, you have the floor, and then I'll go ahead after you with both of the pitchers and Tatis.
So I'm just going to start this off by saying I fully expect there are going to be people out there who are going to be butthurt about my opinions. But guess what? I don't care, because baseball is the weakest sport in the world right now, in my opinion. It is specifically pitchers. Pitchers need to stop being such babies. Time and time again, year after year after year, you have multiple fights that happen because pitchers throw a bad pitch and then they get the pitch just obliterated out of the ballpark by a
guy like Tatis.
By a guy doing his job, and then the pitcher, who for some reason has like immunity to talk shit to him when they don't like the fact he just hit a home run, and then he gets mad. Stop it. Stop it, pitchers. Be better. You are an athlete. You're not a baby. You're not a child. You're not in high school ball anymore. Be better. Now going on to Tatis, right?
Mm-hmm.
That situation is even more ridiculous. This is a situation about unwritten rules. Robert, last time I checked, a rule is not a rule unless it's on paper. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Shane, would that be correct as well?
Yeah, for the most part.
So, I'm sorry. Last time I checked in the rule book of MLB rules, nowhere does it say don't swing at a pitch ever.
Don't swing at a pitch when you're up by 7.
Right. If I'm up there and we're up by 7, and I'm up 3-0, and I see a pitch right down the middle, and my job is to be a hitter, what am I going to do? I'm going to hit the ball because it's my job. And as Trevor Plouffe said on John Boy Media's Talking Sports ball, when it comes to contract time, they're not going to reward you for walks.
Exactly.
They're looking at if you have one more home run on your list, and if it's a grand slam,
they're going to look at it.
Giving you that money. And so
the arbitration. Rachel Luba, sorry to interrupt, talked about this on Corked Up this week about arbitration, and they had a long discussion about arbitration. I went through the first 20 minutes of that, and one of the things they talked about was like, that affects you at contract time. Yeah. The arbitrators are looking at stats. They don't care about anything else. They're literally looking at stats. They don't even watch baseball. They're looking at stats, looking at how many grand slams you hit, how many home runs, how many RBIs.
Steals.
This matters for you when you hit arbitration 4 years down the road, or however long Tatis has before he gets to arbitration.
Speaking of steals, he stole third when they were up 7, up like 6 in a game in the fourth inning, and I applauded. So here's what I say about baseball. Baseball players, hitters, keep hitting.
Yes.
Keep scoring. Keep flaunting it. Because if you got it, as they say, if you got it, flaunt it. And pitchers, if you don't like it, get good. That's it.
And we're not talking about every single pitcher, right? We're talking about these certain pitchers that do these kind of things. A couple things. One, I was thinking when this Tatis thing happened and we talked about it, later that night I was thinking about a certain promotion by the MLB, a certain ad campaign called Let the Kids Play, and they did that last year. It was a really smart campaign about, hey, just let these kids play and have fun. But then when you're actually playing baseball and wanting to actually let these kids play, they're not letting them play. And with the personalities that these guys, Tatis has a great personality, right? Him celebrating, having fun, hitting grand slams. That's what we want to see in baseball. We want to see personality. How many of these young guys in all of these sports, especially baseball, there's just so much young talent there and so much young personality, youthful stuff. Even the veterans have amazing personality. And, you know, we talked about this when Tanner came on. We talked about the future of the MLB and all these things, and we talked about the marketing of the players. That grand slam can be used as a marketing tool. Instead, this is the conversation we're having about it. It's so dumb.
We
And-
very easily sorry to interrupt, but we very easily could be having a conversation about how amazing Tatis is to watch. Like I could be easily saying like, and I would make I mean I will still say like I
Right.
love watching him play, but I also have to say it saddened me to see a guy who just pimped a home run into the grand slam just effortlessly sitting on the bench and getting talked down to by a veteran for hitting a grand slam when usually he should be like getting like the whole bench should be like, yeah, like we got a young guy who can hit a grand slam, like
Right. And we're up by, and
Yeah.
how Brandon, here's one more thing that Rachel Luba talked about, and I think this is another piece that we're missing, and a lot of people are missing as well. This is really important. I think you can vouch for this more than Shane and I, as I'm sure you watch a bit more baseball. At least I can vouch than I do. How many times is it where a team's up by 7, and in the 9th inning, the other team rallies and finds a way to win?
a lot.
Like that grand slam potentially could have helped them win, because imagine if the other team could have actually come back. Like, then if you took a walk in that situation and the other team came back, then it's like, oh, you shouldn't have taken a walk.
Well, I'm sorry. If I'm a fan of the Padres there and I see him come up and he takes a walk, I'm being like, dude, that pitch was right down the middle.
Hit it.
Also, I'm sorry. The ball was in the strike zone. It wasn't going to be that was not going to be that was a
There's not going to be a walk.
It wasn't going to be a walk. It was going to be a strike. And so then he's 3-1. And you know what the pitcher is then doing? He's like, oh, okay. I'm now going to get you out.
I'm not going to throw another strike.
It's such a ridiculous rule because it's like the goal of baseball, as the Padres skipper so elegantly said the next day, backtracking on his crap talking of his player. The next day, talking to the media, he backtracked and said, the goal of baseball is we want to beat up on the other team, and the other team wants to beat up on us. I'm not going to hold back my players. And I'm like,
but you just did the night before.
Why wouldn't you? So you're going to say that now, but you're in the moment. You're gonna be an old fart. You're going to be someone who believes in the unwritten rules. I'm so over it, and unwritten rules and moments like these are what makes me want to stop watching baseball.
It literally every year, well, especially this year, I'm kind of done. Like, I'm just going to wait till October. I'm kind of done because and look, we love baseball. We interviewed the hitting coach of the Orioles, and we had a great interview with him. We love it here, but the reality is the sport cannot act in this form. It's just going to keep losing fans, especially young fans like us who are still growing with the sport and love the youthfulness of it. Shane, what's your thoughts on this rant here?
This reminds me of a time when I was a player many, many moons ago. And I had this coach that I will not name. And he always said, never swing at the first strike. And I was like, why? I only got 3 strikes. Why would I waste one? Let me hit the ball. So this one time he's like, yeah, remember, don't swing at the first strike. And I was like, yeah, okay. First pitch, ball. Second pitch, it's coming at me, and it's right in my zone, up and outside. I was like, oh, perfect. I'm going to take a hack at it. I get an RBI double, okay? And then I go on to score myself after a couple more hits. I was like, yeah. And, my teammates are like, yeah, let's go. Yeah. What does my coach say? Instead of saying, oh, yeah, good job. He goes, why'd you do that? I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you swung at the first strike. I said, yeah. He goes, well, you can't do that. I was like, dude, I got an RBI double. He said, and he's like, I know, but this is the rule we have. And I told him to take a hike.
Yeah.
And he got mad at me. And he's like, what did you say to me? He's like, yeah, I said that. And I was like, and he goes, okay, I'm going to bench you for the rest of the game. I said, all right, cool.
Fine.
I did my job.
I just scored you 2 runs.
Yeah,
and you're mad at me.
I would have been like,
I will not admit fault for this. Screw
Yeah.
off, dude.
I would have been like, yeah, fine. Like, you benched me. Guess what? My batting average in this game is amazing.
And my teammates were not mad at me. They were like, yeah, that was kind of awesome. And that's why, I look at stuff like this, and as a pitcher, if guys hit home runs off of me or whatever, I never really cared because it happens.
Yeah.
Wow, shocker, I know. But the fact that when I was 12 years old, I acted more professional than professional pitchers, that tells you something. Because
now again, we're not talking about every pitcher, but either
no,
way.
I know, but guys like him, because I've been in a situation like that where I was pitching, the count was like 2-0, and then the other team, they were winning, and then this guy hits a home run off of me, and I'm pretty sure they scored like 3 runs off of it. And as the guy was rounding third, I gave him a high five. I was like, yeah, nice hit, man. You know what I mean? Because, it's like, hey, give credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But no, let's complain and moan about, he hit a grand slam off of me. Yeah, grow up, okay, dude. You're a pro. Like, relax. It happens to the best of them. I don't know. It's just annoying. I mean, like you guys were saying, this could be, like, oh, look at how great of a hitter this guy is or whatever. But instead, it's a conversation about, how the pitchers and the pros are a bunch of wimps. So, yeah.
And then Shane, talk about also the other piece. I mean, you kind of mentioned it in some of your stories, but the managers, and both of the managers being like, no, this isn't right. And then for most of the players across the league being like, no, this is great. We need this in our game. What are your thoughts on that piece?
Yeah. Baseball is the one sport of all the sports that I have played where I definitely had managers who were like, oh, we got to stick to the status quo. And, they just took it way too seriously. And I never understood, because for me as a coach, I want to, because I have coached baseball. I like to inspire my guys to have fun, to be better. And I like to have fun with them and play with them as they do that, and, develop their skills with them. And, I've had guys too who, they step up into the box and they're like, they let their first strike go. And I said, oh, why'd you do that? That was your pitch. And they said, well, my coaches have always told me to do that. And I was like, why? Swing away. And they said, really? And I was like, yeah. You get a hit, you get a hit. I don't care. They're like, oh, okay. And that's just like this like I said, this status quo almost among baseball managers. It's just, I just don't get it, really. I mean, if you're in the pros, and you want to let your first pitch go just because the pitchers are so much better and you really want to see your pitch first, that's a bit more understandable. But like, in little league or even high school, what is the point? And the reason I bring that up is because this culture of, managers being, sticking to all these rules and, taking it way too serious. It's like permeated the sport all the way down to the little league age, which is just sad, honestly.
Really unfortunate.
Yeah, because it's just like it's not fun, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because baseball to me has always been, the sport that's kind of relaxed. You just, you're just out there having fun in the summer. Yeah. It's like, all right, I'm at bat.
Like this
you know what I mean?
This season itself, like, all the fun that you usually see in the season is just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not there. It's like everybody's angry, everybody's pissed off, everybody's just like not happy. I just at this point it's kind of like just get through the season. I mean, as Trevor Bauer said in his last episode of his podcast, he said of his vlog.
Right. Which, by the way, his vlog's been amazing also,
Oh
by the
yeah,
way.
his vlogs have been very interesting because it's like an inside look. He called the season a fake season of baseball, which is pretty accurate. But it's also interesting because it's kind of an inside look, and I don't agree with him all the time, but I've realized over time that he's really the only player who's like actually real in baseball, or one of the only players who's real, who doesn't like put on an image. He's very competitive and he plays hard. I mean, he's the first person to say he's not a people person, but it's an interesting inside look, you know.
And then speaking also to finish off this, on a couple of those pieces from the vlog that have also frustrated me, not only with just like what his business is, and obviously momentum's been an awesome look, especially for all of us who enjoy the game of baseball, just like an awesome look at the inside pieces of the sport, these great personalities that he's had on there over the years. But it is those things of like routine and what does a pitcher do? Like it gives you a pitcher's perspective on routine, and then him missing all these starts and all that, and just his constant frustration with that alone. Because I think one of the things that I've realized in watching his vlogs and stuff over the years is just how much of baseball is so much more focused on routine than anything else. Whereas football and basketball, there is some of that. Baseball, routine is so much part of the structure for any of these players, pitcher or hitter as well.
Yeah.
And we just don't have that this year, and it's really frustrating.
Yep.
We're gonna finish.
At least we have basketball.
And football in a few weeks. And last but not least, I'll have Brandon and I kind of go through this UFC 252. Of course, Stipe with a fantastic win on Saturday. But let's talk about Cormier first. What do you remember most about Cormier's career, Brandon?
So I will say this: I don't believe Daniel Cormier needed to win this fight to be considered one of the greatest heavyweights of all time.
Or light heavyweights as well, which
or light heavyweights. I believe this man was special to fighting. He came in his whole career. At first he was overlooked. He came in because as this like pudgy, small, fat dude who everyone's like, oh, look at this dude. And then he got a lot of respect to the point that people were calling him they were equating him to what's his name? The guy who fought in Japan.
I forgot at this moment.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But they were calling him the black version of that dude. But he was an amazing guy to watch fight. He was fun. He was fast. He had an amazing fight record. I would agree that Stipe won that fight.
No, by far he won that fight. There's no question.
It's unfortunate that Cormier only had one fight in the last 2 years of his career. Because you know me, I love watching Cormier fight.
Yeah, same here.
The fight he had where he defended against Derek Lewis, I remember, was just like,
yeah, that was a fun one.
Just an absolute demolition.
That's where I think he got a bunch of respect. I think,
but like because over the years, I mean, when he was fighting in light heavyweight, I mean,
John Jones and that whole mess.
He was just a unstoppable machine once he got the belt. Like, I mean,
yeah.
I
it's always gonna pain me as a Daniel Cormier fan. I love DC so much. Same with you, Brandon. I love watching him fight. it's going to pain me because his career will, and John Jones, same, but actually more, John Jones is always going to have other baggage there as well. But with Cormier, it's like the John Jones thing will always sting him, I think.
I don't think so. I think Cormier tried to fight him again 4 times. And it like
you think
Jones,
he's kind of done with it?
Well, yeah, because Jones kept getting if you watch the video, the reason I know he's done with it is because the last time he was booked to fight him, there's video of him sitting backstage waiting for the fight, and Dana comes up to him and says, John Jones tested positive for steroids again, and he literally is just like, God fucking damn it, like, I'm done. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to fight him again.
I think years down the road it will still hurt him, and I think unfairly it will affect his legacy. But either way, Cormier still, I think, deserves more love from UFC fans, and he's gained so much love not only in the octagon but as a commentator. The guy's going to be a Hall of Fame commentator, not just fighter in the future. He's not only one of him, Joe Rogan and John Anik are not only the best fighting duo in terms of fighting trio in terms of commentary. They're some of the best in all of sports, and I'm gonna love watching those guys when we get to more pay-per-views down the road. But in terms of DC's actual career, it's amazing what he's done, and he just deserves so much more respect.
Stipe had a beautiful recognition of Cormier's career in the post-fight media scrum, and he's just respected by both heavyweight fighters and light heavyweight fighters. So
yeah. And then with Stipe, he's clearly the heavyweight GOAT. I think that's pretty simple.
He's going to hold it for a while. What do you like about watching Stipe fight, and not only just looking at his legacy at this point? He's like the quintessential heavyweight, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. He's like sturdy, really hard to take down, but he's weirdly quick for a heavyweight. Yeah, no, that's for sure. It's strangely quick for a heavyweight, which was why that fight between him and Cormier was really good, because like for as heavy as Cormier was, like he could move. So I think the great thing about Stipe is I believe that Stipe will invite any challenger to come at him. Francis Ngannou, come on down for the second fight. That would be a good rematch. Come on down for the second fight. Maybe John Jones? No. John Jones doesn't deserve it. Move up. He doesn't deserve another title fight ever, in my opinion. He's such a piece of crap. He's just I know it's UFC, but there's some honor in UFC, you know? Like, if you're going to be an actual trash human being, you should not get title fights. Like, Dana White needs to make a fucking example and be like, people like that don't deserve to be in UFC. But in terms of Ngannou, like, I think that's the clear next fight, and I hope it's much different than the first fight, because the first fight wasn't that interesting. Yeah. Stipe took him to the ground. I think Ngannou's developed his ground game a little bit more, but it'll surely be better than the last time we saw Ngannou fight. Yeah, I'm definitely ready for that fight for the second time. I mean, that was like feeding a fish to a shark. Oh, it's funny because Rosenstrike did pick up a win this weekend as well. Yeah, but like he wasn't fighting Ngannou. Yeah, which is like much different. I think we both knew what was going to happen there. Yeah. That's it for today, guys. Great show this week. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Brandon. We'll be back next week. We're going to do AFC predictions next week, and we're going to preview a few of the games from week one. We're going to split up week one into 2 weeks to get you guys ready and ramped up for the NFL season and, of course, all the great stuff going on in the NBA as well. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you all next week.
Take care.